family mode.
We'd like to welcome you to this webinar today. My name is Bill Baker. I'm with Firestorm, and this is the Year in Review in conjunction with our good friends at the University of Alabama. It is not about the football team, although that would be a marvelous thing to have a year in review. This is about the year in review as far as disaster recovery go in the entire country and worldwide. We're pleased to have Jim Satterfield as our presenter today, and this is part of the Crisis Coach webinar series. You can go to firestorm.com and you can watch past webinars and register for future webinars. We also like to have you as our friend on Facebook. Firestorm Solutions on Facebook. On Twitter, we're Firestorm Solo. There is a hashtag for this session, and that hashtag is Crisis Coach. Firestorm transforms crisis into value and empowers you to manage risk and crises. And maybe Jim can get the screen to advance here for us.
Your sound fading, Bill, for some reason. So I'll jump right in and start to talk and see if we can cover these others. Obviously, as you think about Firestorm, it's crisis management, critical decision support, crisis communications, crisis public relations, and crisis management. There is a disclaimer today, complete without the oral comments and discussion. Any work product provided by Firestorm must be read in guidance from your legal counsel and in line with your laws and regulations locally, regionally, and nationally. Also, that the information should not be interpreted as legal advice or legal opinion. Today, as in this series, it's underwritten by the University of Alabama, the College of Continuing Education, and Brenda Truelove is our contact there. And Brenda is away at the moment, dealing with other matters at the university. But she did want me to mention about the professionally speaking program that's coming up on February the 10th. And it's designed to help anyone to be prepared to deal with the types of things that we're talking about today. How you speak, communicating in those types of environments. It's designed for senior level leadership and then down into the professionals within the organization to craft those messages that need to be there in anyone to overcome the fear of speaking. I understand that's one of the major concerns that individuals have, is talking to groups and communicating. So crafting those messages, how you use visual aids, keeping all those words off the screen and getting new images, including in there, and to deal with even the nonverbal communications areas. The leadership of it, as you can see on the screen, are excellent professionals that are well known in the industry and the space, as with all of the continuing education opportunities at the University of Alabama. In fact, I'll be there later today, and we'll be meeting with a group tomorrow talking about HR's role in business continuity and the issues that need to be addressed. So I would encourage you to put that on your agenda. The date, again, is February the 10th. It's at the University of Alabama at the Bryant Conference Center. And Bill, with your lead-in to talk about the football team, that's always an impressive name to see. If you've got questions, you can contact them directly at 205-348-3000 or 1-866-432-2015. The website, www.bamaatwork.ua.edu, and then the conference itself is being identified there. Or reach directly out to Brenda Truelove, and that direct number is 205-348-9066. So a great opportunity, and I would encourage you to take advantage of it and to continue as you grow in your career. Today, it's Jim Satterfield. I'm glad to be back with you and talking about what's been going on as we think about this year and the activities that are out there. If you've got questions about this workshop or other webinars and events that we do, you can go to firestorm.com, click on the word there, resources, and you can see about the 2017 editorial calendar, the webinars, the test exercise, the virtual events, and the conferences where Firestorm staff will be appearing. So when we think about the year in review, I think anytime you start a discussion in December and you're thinking about what's happened during the year and you're getting ready to build to the next, and there's been an election, that's going to suddenly put an intensity of focus that we don't get to see in a normal event in a series. As we're seeing about planning for the unplanned, and that's going to be a theme we're going to talk about in the year in review as we've discussed today. And we see the terrorist bombings there in New York and New Jersey, the attacks in Brussels, the earthquake in Italy, other violence episodes. Clearly, cyber breach remains on our radar screen as a significant threat and involvement. But to the individuals that were there, these came as unplanned. They were just suddenly there. What do they do? How do they respond? And I think that's the challenge for all of us as we think about these types of events in planning to make sure that we get the type of outcome that we're looking for. Now, in all of these areas, you've got to start with a solid foundation. The picture that you see on the screen was the building the foundation for the new World Trade Center after they were lost, and certainly that was an icon for us all for years, and the new tower similarly carries forward. But you just don't go out and throw up a building and have it be recognized and supported from there. Similarly, as we think about the types of plans and areas that we need to have in place, we need to have a framework to think about how we plan for the unplanned event. So if you think about it, things that happen fall into 4 major buckets, and particularly through the year, and we'll give you some highlights of some of those as we talk about them in examples today. Something could happen to our facilities. Something could happen to our buildings and structures and cause a significant disruption. Something could happen to our workforce and our people. It could be a violence act. It could be a terrorist event. It could be a communicable illness. We could have a problem with our information security or technology. We've become increasingly dependent upon technology in every aspect of our life, and any disruption there, and we've seen the cyber breaches, and that certainly was well seen through the election cycle and all of the discussion around information security. And finally, something that happens to your brand or reputation. Now, the first 3 could trigger the last event, but there could be other things that could occur. We certainly have seen this year the events at Wells Fargo and the impact on the organization as a result of that. So if you think about your plans as you're designing your business continuity program, your crisis management program, having something in place to be able to deal with those events and planning in each of these categories will make your plan more effective. So the initial actions that you're going to take and the words that you say are going to influence the outcomes, particularly in that first hour. Almost everything you learn initially is wrong in a crisis. And as you have seen, those initial actions, the decisions that companies make, the words that they say, is going to determine, is this going to stabilize or will they continue to escalate and become a specific problem? So planning those initial thoughts out in advance, putting a structure in place, is going to make a difference in the outcome. As we see those and we plan for a crisis, there is a common approach that you can look at, an environment to how we evaluate what's going on. Now, in all of these things, since we've just said that, look, most of what you learn initially is wrong, you need to have some type of access to your own intelligence network. The term of art here is an open source intelligence network. Today, if we go on the internet and social media, we're going to be getting reports from the people that are actually experiencing the crisis or the events that we have seen happen around us. Having that independent information coming into you with a way to screen and analyze will make a difference, because now you'll pick up insights that you wouldn't have gained otherwise, or it will confirm what you're hearing from your own direct sources. Now, if you don't have a plan in place on how you're going to make decisions in a crisis, because we're finding out in many cases we're having to choose between 2 bad alternatives and then make a decision to continue to monitor as we adjust our strategy as more facts and information become available. So the way we have to establish this is putting a decision structure in place for our crisis management team. We think about those types of structures around 5 different phases. The pre-action, everything you've got to have in place in advance. The onset, what do we do immediately at that point in time? Impact assessment, how bad is it? The response and recovery phase, and then last, the post-recovery and consequence management. In all of these areas, the events are going to happen very quickly. The crisis will move, but the consequences will be extended for a longer period. Now, as we think about those, if we can start to plan for those types of events. We were on the phone this morning with a large public company and focusing in specifically of if they had significant events that occurred, what would they be looking for? And so that you can leverage, that's good to say the right word, you can leverage planning in advance. If you had an impact into the 4 areas that we talked about, if something happened to our facilities, to our people, to our information security, to our information technology, and then finally to our brand and reputation, so that we can leverage our responses appropriately. Now, when we think about responses and why they fail, and we look particularly again at the events from this year, we'll see that people in many cases sometimes are overconfident. They think they can handle anything and that they're smarter than everyone else and that they can just jump right into that and handle it on the fly. We find that false confidence creates a second crisis, and in fact, you've heard us discuss in other webinars about the next crisis you'll face is the response to the crisis that you currently are in. Now, below was a tweet that went out, and you can see it. This was from a contractor that was working, and as you can imagine, this caused quite a turmoil in a response. The question is, why was the communications going out at all on the subject and the intent? Now, one of the common things that we learned about responses is if you're explaining, you're losing. And look at the response from the mayor, and then look at what the contractor came back and how it came together. Because if you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake. You cannot explain and the rationale on it and trying to get through this. It ended up costing the contractor and the mayor their job as a result of it, and then she felt like that she was being used as a hate crime against her in that response. So a simple response to an avenue that didn't go through a clearing of messages and communications triggered this type of a backlash that immediately went out. We're going to see that she was not alone in those events of what happened in similar circumstances. So what are these characteristics of a poor response? First of all, there was no controls in place. There was no check and balance here and before a message went out. We didn't identify who would help us if we needed to communicate, and there wasn't an intelligence network there to send back those informations. As you can imagine, a great many people were surprised by that event, and when you're surprised and you're forced to respond, that's not a positive outcome. I'll talk a little bit more about surprise a little later. But many times then you see others in an organization start to interfere with the communications because they're trying to fill a void. And we get mixed messages that are going out within each of these areas. Now, when you think about this past year, Prince George's County had some issues that went on around abuse scandals that were occurring within it. And even it went to the point of jeopardizing some of the board members, again, an election year, will they maintain their seats, will they lose their seats, and associating with it, because what can you communicate about sexual molestation or abuse within a school district? Obviously, your communications choices are very limited. Now look at this aspect of surprise and the message that was done. This is a mattress manufacturer, Miracle Mattresses, and the comment on the left is a video that went up on YouTube, and they were trying to promote mattress sales on the 9/11 anniversary. Now, if you were thinking, boy, that's bad taste, nobody would ever do that. Well, once again, we found whenever you say no one would ever do it, that's exactly what they did. But if you look at the commentary from the owner there on the right, you're seeing a distancing. Oh, they didn't clear it with me. I didn't know about it. And all of those aspects. Now, that's either telling us that the company was not well run, or there weren't controls in place. And then if you worked in the company, how would you feel about it? The last time a surprise was good, I was 5, and it was my birthday. If you think about your organization, if someone's coming in and yelling surprise to you, they're going to be talking about an event where you're caught by surprise and are having to respond quickly to those types of areas, and the results will be not as positive as what you would hope in each of those areas. So we have established a concept that I would encourage you to think about that would help to deal with this type of a problem. And it is to ask why 5 times. That's the why times 5 that you see here. Because as you know, since that's the information you've got is maybe incomplete, maybe wrong, and you're going to be forced to do it, you want to slow the process down, gather that information before you start to communicate, before that message goes out in doing it, and then it helps you to stabilize that area. So when someone comes to you in the organization and says, we need to get out in front of this, we need to get our message out, you want to ask why. They'll give you an answer, and then you'd ask why again. And so as you go through that 4 times, and then to the 5th, once you clear that level, then if all those answers are positive, and yes, we definitely have to communicate, then you're clearly ready to move forward. But if there's some doubt associated with it, if there's some level of confusion, then you should hold that communication until there's clarity around it. I will tell you that what we see is that someone comes forward from the board or senior leadership and says, we've got to frame this issue. We've got to get in front of it. We've got to control the message. And we'll talk about control also shortly. But thinking about these things, going through this question of why 5 times will make a significant difference. So when we do communicate, we want to communicate initially on broad terms. We don't want to give numbers. We don't want to give specifics. Yes, we tested everything. Well, you'll find out, in fact, you didn't. We had everything under control. Well, obviously not, because the crisis ensued. Now, one of the things that happens if you've had an event, as we've talked about something happening to your workforce, if you've had significant injuries, if you've had deaths in that area, you're going to find that you'll have police and fire and other first responders on your site helping to deal with that. And I've yet to find a police chief or a fire chief who didn't love the camera and who didn't want to communicate. I would encourage you to let those initial communications about what's happened, the investigation, and moving into those areas to be given by those first responders. Let the fire chief talk. Let the police chief talk. Hold your leadership back, because you're going to be talking later about how you're going to deal with this matter to make sure that it doesn't define your organization, that you're going to invent the future, and that you're really going to embrace the families that are involved. Because if you're talking about the problem, you're talking about the past, and your leadership needs to be focused on the future. Oh, we're back to Prince George's there, and you're seeing that they're trying to explain why they didn't strengthen their school's sexual abuse policies. So you've got the school superintendent involved. You've got the board involved. You have the county executive involved, trying to hold these detailed conversations when, in fact, there are no opportunities to deal with those matters. Now, as we focus on and we think about a crisis, there are 3 types of communications that occur. And by the way, this is generally the order in which they're communicated. The first communication is around coordination. This particularly is in that life safety at the onset of the crisis. What do you need people to do? Do you need them to evacuate, shelter in place, lock down, lock out from those areas? And those communications are generally internal, and that's the first type of communication you would look for. The second category is generally more related to the crisis. How do you want us to view this for the impact on our organization, and how would this be concerned? Those communications generally occur a little later into the crisis, not in that initial kickoff. And then finally, compliance. Depending upon the nature, we mentioned information security. If there's been a compromise of personally identifiable information or protected health information from your organization, there'll be notification requirements that you need to do, and the regulations around that vary state by state, and they point to the fact that it has to be done, quote, in a reasonable time. Now, on the screen, you'll see something that happened at Gatlinburg, and that was the big fire that occurred in the past week. And it went out and did significant damages. Hundreds of homes were lost, and thousands of people were displaced as a result of that. But it's the understanding that the notification, the coordination, the critical message of what people needed to do didn't in fact go out. It had been written, it was crafted, it was ready to go, and apparently the send message never went. If you don't get that coordination message out at the very beginning, you're not going to get the type of output that you want to look for. Now, as you look for it, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Jim. This is Karen. I just wanted to let you know that Brenda has joined us, and
I saw her.
Okay.
Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Karen. And Brenda, welcome. Sorry we missed you there at the beginning. We did talk about the communications and class that's coming up in February, and we'll circle back to that. So welcome. One of the things that we were thinking about these types of communications immediately in the crisis, OSU, that's Ohio State University. I understand it's not Alabama, folks. But they had the terrorist attack from locally on. And obviously the initial message goes out, what do you want people to do? And then you start to see the evolution of comments there. Shelter in place in the North Campus area, follow directions of the police, continue to shelter in place, avoid the area of college, and more information will follow. Buckeye alert, active shooters on the campus, run, hide, fight. Watts Hall, 19th and College as a specific location. These messages, as they learned more, could become more specific and more directed in terms of what you needed to do and respond. So this is the first type of communication, and they're almost always around life and safety in that crisis event. As it continues to move on, we can begin to think some about our brand and reputation, and you see a message from the president of Ohio State and talking about Buckeye Strong, that as we move forward, unified and secure, and keeping that message carrying forward. Later, you could have the what happened, what did we know, and what did we occur type of communications and tying to compliance. Now, this is an example of, if I was Ohio State, I'd let the police talk about this. I wouldn't be talking about it from the college's perspective, because the responders came in and eliminated the threat to the university at that point. So as we think about types of communications that we would say in that type of an event, there are three messages. These are sometimes called home bases, and then beyond that you would have message maps laying out exactly what you would communicate. The home bases are generally as follows. Number one, we will not be defined by this event. That's who we are. That's not who we are is what's on our mission statement, what's on our website, what really defines us as a business or a college or a school. What do we stand for? Because whatever bad thing happened, that's not who we are. We will invent the future is talking about what are we going to do to make sure that this type of event doesn't occur again, that we're not going to be subjected to those levels, and that finally that we'll reach out to the families that were involved and impacted. These events you can certainly talk about. These messages you can carry forward with and come across significantly better than no comment. They also aren't explaining what occurred, because in many cases there isn't an immediate explanation. But you can talk about this and give a sense of unity within your organization and continue that direction. Now, we can't manipulate the press. Many times you'll see attempts to get messages out in a particular way. And one advantage that we have today that we didn't have a decade ago is that we can communicate with our critical stakeholders directly. We know how to reach our employees or our students. We know how to reach to our vendors and suppliers. We know how to reach out to our customers or clients in these areas directly. So we can carry our message directly to them. We don't need to go to the media and say, could you tell this group this statement? They have their own agendas, and there's certainly been a lot of discussion around the media in the political environment that we found ourselves in over the year. And if you'll see below, there's an example of 2 Wall Street journals there. And you'll see exactly the same picture, exactly the same day. The headline on the right-hand column remains the same. But look at the difference in the verbiage there. Trump softens his tone. Trump talks tough on Wall. As you see this, and you see a difference, the Wall Street Journal with their later edition in the day, and the little red circle that's listed there can show you that the first was a 2-star and this was a 4, which meant it came out later in the day. As the conversations were coming out, you see the media interpreted it and took their different position. So we can't always control our message, and we can't manipulate the media in doing it by moving through them. That's why it's important that you know how to reach out directly, because clearly the media will not always be your friend, if ever. And the focus really isn't just on the crisis. It's going to be on the subject of consequence management. How do we deal with the consequences of these events as they've occurred? Now, if you may remember in the election cycle, there was a lot of discussion about Breitbart. And Kodak, Kellogg's, as a result of that, pulled their ads from Breitbart amid there was discussions about it pushed hate speech and was labeled that way. And so they had concerns about being tied with that if they were advertising in that publication. What they didn't anticipate was what immediately happened, which was a backlash. Hashtag dump Kellogg's, sign the petition to boycott Kellogg's. So what they were trying to do was to avoid controversy. That was their intention. What they found themselves being at the center of that. And it led to their blacklist of Breitbart was interpreted by the individuals who read it and used it as declares that hate for their 45 million readers. That's 45 million people that suddenly were exposed to the opportunity. Do we want to buy Kellogg's cereals or do we not want to buy those? So there's consequences with every action and every communication that you make in a crisis. And the crises for the year really emphasize that in all of our minds and our responses. And I think the common theme is what you know, you don't know what you don't know. If you look at this pie chart, that green square pie piece shows you what you know. And we're pretty clear about what's occurring in this area. And even in some situations, you know what you don't know. If there had been an event, you know that there were 10 people injured. You may not know how severely they were injured. But the big portion there is that orange part of the pie. What you don't know, you don't know. That's why it's so critical as you're planning your communications in each of these areas and trying to maintain it. So if you are surprised, if you find yourself moving, the decisions will not be optimal at this point. And if you don't have this intelligence coming in, you will then lose the control. So you need to create and to manage your own source of intelligence so that you can confirm the facts. You need to control the messages, as we talked about earlier. Identify what those consequences could ultimately be and be prepared. Now, fortunately, in any type of a crisis, and we talked about the 4 types earlier, something happened to our facility, something happened to our people, something happened to our information security and technology, or something happened to our brand and reputation. We can also talk about what the common failures are. The largest single failure in a disaster or crisis is supply chain failure. The second is that your employees aren't prepared for work and at home. Some 70% of employees don't know what they're supposed to do in a disaster or crisis, and 95% don't have a plan at home. Third is the failure to identify and monitor all threats and risks, and that's really what we've been talking about today, this monitoring of threats and risk and being prepared for that. And lastly, the failure to keep your plans updated and tested, and then having a crisis communications plan. If you don't test your plans, you don't know they will work. You don't have the level of support that you need to have everyone on the same page at the same time. Now, we measure how organizations do in a crisis looking at it using a maturity model. And you can see we're looking at the dimensions of decision process, roles and responsibilities, information clarity, speed of decision making, and communications effectiveness. We measure that from a stage 1 where everything comes as a surprise to a stage 2 where it's reactive. Stage 3 is starting to become supportive and proactive, becoming a key part of your culture. So that's one of the reasons that we want to think about each of these areas as we plan and manage and communicate in a crisis. What we've seen from the lessons that's learned from the political season that we've been in and the disasters and crises that we talked about at the very beginning, it's going to be very difficult to develop that if you don't have this framework in place, if you don't have a structure. We know your plans are going to be tested this year. The only question is, do you want to test them before there's a crisis or wait until the crisis occurs? So there's a lot to think about, and as a guiding area that we would help you with, we follow a predict, plan, perform methodology. Predict what the vulnerabilities and threats are. What are those crises? What could they possibly be? Having a plan of how we're going to respond to those, a strategy. And then finally, performing, maintaining a monitoring of the intelligence as the events are starting to occur, being supported with resources externally to manage in those crises. Now, we've covered a bunch of topics today, and there's going to be more detail in a brief that you can download from the Firestorm website. If you go to firestorm.com briefs, you can see that. But there's a lot more for us to think about today as we talk about communications in those areas. And so, Brenda, what I'd like to do is to go back and I'll jump back into our slide deck here to that picture, which I saw at the beginning. Let me go back up, and we'll start here and ask you just to give us a quick statement. I went through these and talked about it. Anything you want to share about this particular event that's coming up on February the 10th, Brenda?
Yes, good morning, and I do apologize for my tardiness. 3 people were calling me about a program this morning, so that's what we do. We have to react to crises as well, and professionally speaking, which is scheduled for February 10th at the Bryant Conference Center, is just a great workshop, hands-on, experiential time for individuals to be able to craft their messages, particularly be able to use in crisis situations, but also in your everyday work life. If we don't plan out what we're going to say, sometimes we can stumble around. So what you will learn will be about crafting your messages, the proper use of visual aids, how to overcome public speaking anxiety. A lot of people are calling me about the workshop and are asking me, do I really have to stand up in front of a group? And we try to encourage them to please come on to the workshop, that we make it as less painful as possible, but for individuals to be able to learn skills to be able to combat anxiety when they're in a situation where they're speaking in front of either a small group or a rather large group. So our 2 professionals are Dr. Alexa Chilcutt and Dr. Adam Brooks. They co-manage the public speaking program at the University of Alabama and are just wildly popular with both students and professionals. We're taking our professionally speaking on the road, and we'll be in Mobile, Huntsville, and Atlanta sometime next year. But this is a great opportunity for us to Tuscaloosa to be able to come to our workshop on February 10th. And Jim, thank you so much for your great partnership this year. I always learn so much from Jim, and I was expecting him to talk about the Gatlinburg fires, and I was not disappointed. So, Jim, thanks for your great partnership, and looking forward to a great 2017 with you as well.
And excited to be a part and work with the University of Alabama. I think there are a lot of good opportunities there, and I mentioned the meeting tomorrow in Tuscaloosa for HR directors around HR's role in business continuity. As we think about it, we're all challenged in each direction as these crises occur, and they move very quickly to handle those types of events. I think that we need to be prepared to handle whatever happens in front of us. You wouldn't be on the call today if you weren't in the area focused and thinking around business continuity and crisis management within your organization. Those challenges are great, and there's an opportunity for you to take the leadership role to make a difference. If you would like to view this or other of the webinars that we've done over the course of the year, you can go to firestorm.com. You can share a link there with anyone in your organization. You can download the briefs around those. All of that information is there. If you've got specific questions you would like to have answered, you can contact us at webinars@firestorm.com, or you can call us at 800-321-2219. One of the things that we all know is that there will be a crisis next year. It's going to be like the ones we've seen this year. It's going to come suddenly. It's going to be a surprise. And it's going to find a stress within your organization that most people are not ready to deal with. The initial information that you receive will be wrong. It'll be incomplete. You'll be under internal pressure to make a comment, to get a press release out, to hold a press conference. If you succumb to that pressure without sitting down and analyzing the events, you're going to find that the response is going to be suboptimal, and that will create, in fact, another crisis within your organization. Slowing it down, stabilizing the situation. Keep in the back of your mind a term that we use a lot, and it's called crisis stop, S-T-O-P. The S stands for stabilize. You're trying to slow it down, understand what's going on, get the parties that are involved, and let's come together to see what it is that we know, not what we think, but what we know. The T in stop stands for triggering. What kind of responses do we need? Do we need to bring in counselors to help us deal with this? Do we need to reach out to our insurance company to get funds? Do we need to engage outside legal counsel or bring in a crisis manager to help with the event? O is for opine. What's going to happen next? What's our focus on the consequences associated with this particular crisis that's coming in? And then finally, the P is to prevent the common mistakes. We've seen the same mistakes made over and over in a crisis, and there are specific statements that you can and cannot do. There are actions that you can and cannot take. And so what we want you to do is to avoid those mistakes and make a difference. If you find yourself in a crisis, call the number that you see up on the screen. We will help you initially in that crisis in the first hour, because the words that you say, the actions that you take will determine, will this crisis stabilize or will it escalate? Will this crisis get worse or better? And by focusing on those decisions, actions, and words, you're going to have a significantly better outcome. If you're at a loss at what to say, the information that we shared earlier about not being defined by the event, inventing the future, and embracing the families, give you a foundation, framework in which you can begin that response. If you think about your own organization and go back to the areas that we talked about, what could happen to your facility? What could happen to your people? What could happen to your information security and technology or your brand and reputation? Once you understand those, then you can be better prepared to what would we do? What would we say if any of those events occurred? My prayer for you is that 2017 is a great year, that everything works well. Those families living around Gatlinburg, where Brenda mentioned just a few minutes ago, woke up on a day and it was not one that they were prepared for. It was not one that they were ready for. And the communications and actions made a difference. Unfortunately, more than a dozen people lost their life at that point in time. When we think about events and we think about what could happen, every crisis is a human crisis. It comes back to what's the impact on our people and what are we going to do about it. By having a plan, being ready, and making a difference, then you're starting to transform that crisis into value for your organization. Thank you, Brenda, for the University of Alabama and all that you do and the information that you share and what you brought, and a continual reminder for us that learning is lifelong. It's a continuing education opportunity for all of us. Everyone have a very Merry holiday, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year in this coming year as we see and move forward. We look forward to our webinar series next year with the University of Alabama. If you go to our website, you can listen to and view past recordings of these events. Have a great day, everyone. Look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.